What's up, boss? This is Abraham's wallet. We span the gap between the austerity of obedience to God and the prosperity rising from faithfulness. Run your home and your dough like a biblical boss.
Mark, welcome to Abraham's Wallet. It's a podcast for family leaders about money and running your home. Are you going to wear that hat while we're on today?
Well, I'm wearing a hat today because you may not know, but it's LoDoFeb, and my head is not looking well groomed, and hasn't for about 2 weeks. So I'm kind of trying to hide this nappy mat on top of my head.
Well, if we could go back in time, I would just send you some cleaner pomade and let that try to solve the problem. But we'll go with the hat today.
I'm also kind of trying to grow out a little bit of a mane for the trip we'll be leaving for in about 1 week, where we will be snowmobiling through northern Michigan in the dead of winter. So I'm a little bit trying to, anything that could retain heat, I'm for.
Okay, fair enough. Well, before we proceed into today's topic, I'd like to hit a couple of introductory ideas to throw by you. I don't know if you have anything in the way of patter. Have you?
I was curious how your LoDo's going. Do you have a quick update on LoDoFeb?
Yeah, I mean, my short answer is I enjoy it.
Yeah.
We are. Last night was just hilarious. We refer to about twice a week now. We're eating leftovers and other miscellany for dinner, and we just call that poo-poo platter night. And so the things that we're eating, I thought this was hilarious. My daughter had in her mind that she really wanted noodles to be her starch for dinner. And I shrugged my shoulders and like, there's no spaghetti or any other kind of long noodle in here. Here's what I can offer. Lasagna noodles, fat, wide lasagna noodles. And she's like, yeah, that'll work.
Yeah.
So cut to her cutting with a fork and knife, big, wide swaths of like sheets of noodles. She was like, this counts. I thought I got a little humor out of that. But we're eating breakfast sausage as a featured meat for dinner. We're just all over it.
I brought it up because I want to bring you a conundrum that I have.
Okay.
And I'm not willing to make any declarations today, but I think I might have made a decision today about LoDoFeb. But
all right.
We've been hosting my mother-in-law. She's having a lot of work done on her house, so she needed a place to stay. So she's been staying with us. And she knows it's LoDoFeb, but she's not having her own LoDoFeb, right? And so multiple times during this experience, I've opened my fridge and it's been fully stocked with stuff. My grandma.
I see.
And the kids are like, this is great. This is like, we don't have to suffer at all. And I thought, Grandma moves out on February 28th. I'm thinking we might take it another month in the Parrett house just to get that muscle flexed.
Might extend.
It feels like we really haven't even gotten halfway into the pantry yet.
I've been known to do that in the past, and not exactly declare it. So, yeah, I would support that.
The things I miss. I really wanted an Egg McMuffin this morning, and I took my wife to a doctor's appointment. There was a McDonald's next door while I was waiting for her, and I didn't do it. But things like that I've missed. But the eating through the pantry is like you said, it's a delight. And per the question we asked at the onset of the month, I'm definitely on the gaining weight, not losing weight side of things.
Yes.
Because yesterday was like grilled cheese, and I found a tomato and sliced it up and stuck it in there.
Right.
That was lunch.
Right.
But yeah.
It's kind of like camping. It's kind of like the forced restrictions is a kind of a little bit of an adventure. I think the number one thing I miss is kind of like you. It sounds so dumb and obvious, but like the mid morning or mid afternoon drive through pick me up, whether it's a Starbucks or a vanilla iced coffee from McDonald's, which those are 99 cents, folks. It's a good deal, but still, I'm not going to do it this month. And those kind of little, I don't know, whiz bang kind of like keep my life exciting kind of things. It's good for us to cut those out for a minute.
Yeah, this morning I just finished a book that was about Vietnam, and they were talking about the rations these guys would eat when they were out on these long jungle hikes. And it was like, I got beans and rice with a packet of grape Kool-Aid dumped into it. And it was all just about how can you get the calories in? And
Right.
I thought, until we get there, are we really LoDoFebbing?
Right.
Where
We
it's just like,
really kind of have a sweet gig going, period.
yeah. So
speaking of old episodes, you didn't speak of an old episode, but it makes me think of your best books episode. And I am currently in a couple of books that you guys recommended. One, I think I like Dave Eggers a whole lot more than you do. And so I got the Every, primarily because you guys had some contention over it. And I really like The Circle. So I'm reading the Every. I also got 2034 and have started in on that. And it's a slow burn from the beginning. I assume that things are about to go very bad and they'll get more interesting. But as my daughters have observed to me, in 10 years, this guy's really put the shelf life of his book right in the title, didn't he?
I don't know. I think people are still reading 1984. And so,
do you think that 2034 is 1/10 as prescient or important as 1984?
not unless we get involved in nuclear war with China between now and then, in which case I'd say that'd be good for his book sales, assuming there are people left to buy books.
And then it'll be very important. Okay. All right. It's been a few minutes now. I'm ready to get into our topic. Are you?
I'm ready. Let's get in.
Okay. One of the things that we bring to the table when it comes to blending faith and finances in this biblical boss kind of way is intentionality and helping people think through what they're doing. And we believe that planning for the future of your family is an absolute critical skill. It's so one of the critical skills that it's one of your critical skills. And your critical skills of finance is talking about inheritance and legacy kind of issues. So when we're thinking about what's going to happen in your family, what can you predict is going to happen? What can you help make happen that you want to happen? Here's a top of mind one for me right now. Hey, everybody, you're going to die. Everybody that's listening, there will be a day when, unless there's a trumpet that sounds that ends the whole show, you're going to die and there's going to be a funeral and you're either going to be in a casket or something's going to happen to your body. Have you made any plans for that? Have you ever thought of that? That's something that you know is going to happen and you can make plans for it. So I was just thinking about the kind of planning, forecasting, being strategic about what's going to happen in the future of our family. There are really precious few major disruptors which will permanently change the dynamic of your family. You can sit and wait for them to slam you in the head, as most people do, or you can give them a little forethought, which God encourages, by the way. Remember, he says, look at that ant. See, that ant is giving a little forethought for the winter that is to come. And I like that. Do what that ant's doing. So those moments that permanently change the dynamic of your family, which you can think about in the future, they include births, permanently changes the dynamic of your family. Deaths permanently change the dynamic of your family. The dynamic of my family has permanently changed as of today. My relationship with my mother changes. My relationship with my sister changes. My where my children sit, like in the air kind of thing, and there's this like bump up that happens when the generations before us pass on. All of these things are happening, and they're irreparable. Things change forever. Births, deaths, and marriages. Marriages permanently change what happens in your family. And I think that we can make the mistake of just going, well, when it happens, and we'll deal with it then. Marriage is such an important financial moment. It's an important relational moment. It should be an important spiritual moment. And we believe that you should do some planning around it. Before Mark and I start to talk about this subject from a financial planning point of view, I'm going to throw us over real quick to a conversation that I had with my wife. If you don't know my wife, her name is Dora. She's been planning weddings for 17 years. It's her business, and she knows a little bit about the subject. So I'll throw it over and we'll let her talk to us. Here we go.
Okay, look everybody, here she is, her very first appearance ever on Abraham's Wallet. It's my wife, Dora. Dora, you're what they call a wedding planner?
That's correct.
And
Almost 18 years.
for almost 18 years you've been planning weddings. Okay, well, we could get into a great discussion of your business and how it all started and all that, but we don't have time for that. So we're going to talk about weddings today. And I'm interested in you telling us, what does a wedding cost?
Well, I can tell you what the average wedding in the United States cost.
Okay.
Okay. The average wedding right now in the United States is about $27,000.
Uh-huh.
When I first started, 22. So it's really hovered in those 20s. I would say.
So Mark and I did a little calculation. And you had a child born today, and you wanted to pay for her wedding, you wanted to fund it, and you had 4% inflation per year, you'd be around $72,000 is what the wedding would be 22 years from now.
I don't think it's going to increase that way.
Okay, so we've been talking about my parents' wedding lately. So that was some borrowed dresses. My dad borrowed the suit. My mom borrowed the dress. They had the ceremony in the church, their local church. Their minister did it. I'm sure that they gave him nothing for it. They had a reception at a friend's house. A friend baked the cake.
Yeah, probably cake and punch.
Maybe made some coffee. $50 that day, I would be surprised. So there's always going to be that, right? There's always going to be the bare bones wedding. So here in the city, most of our viewers live in Cincinnati. Was a $10,000 wedding lame?
$10,000 is a lame wedding if you have 200 people, if you want expecting to feed all of them any kind of dinner, if you want to have live entertainment, if you want to have a photographer that is not a friend shooting photos. You know, it really is what do you want your wedding to be? Do you want it to be, a lot of people? Do you want it to be a sit-down meal or a buffet in the evening? I mean, if you parents had $10,000, that would have been
Unbelievable. Okay, let me paint up a wedding and you ballpark it for me.
okay.
Okay, we're going to be at a country club or a hotel ballroom. We want 100 people there. We want a sit-down meal that's chicken, steak, or salmon. I would like a live band there. It can be a local band. I would like minimal flowers, centerpieces, and maybe a couple of big things that we use up at the front during the ceremony. We move them to the hotel. I would like a pretty good photographer and videographer.
Okay. Again, I'm going to say, what country club in Cincinnati? The Cincinnati Country Club is
No,
not quite as veteran. And there's also something like Lissettoville. You know what I mean?
Yeah, let's say that.
I mean, I think
Let's
it's
say-
how to describing 30 to 40.
Okay. That's kind of a good ballpark, 30 to 50 for a really nice wedding in the city.
Yeah, you could probably, yes, you could find a venue.
Since if what's really important to you is to have the highest end photographer you can find, well, there's your $30,000. There's your budget gone like that. Or if you want a nationally amazing band.
Also important to say, it's really important for you to decide, what do we want to spend? If it's $10,000, that's all you can, then you have to be creative and work around it. Like, what does our budget allow for? Is this experience important to us? You might be thinking that is a complete waste of money. And, that's your perspective. Obviously, creating experiences is my whole job, to curate an amazing experience. So I place a really high value on that because that's what I do for a living and do for people.
Sure.
I mean, we overspent on our wedding more than we had, and we had to pay it off, but I don't regret it at all. Like,
What did we spend on our wedding?
I think we spent close to 30.
Okay.
And we had some money given to us by family, but like we had to pay it, pay it off.
Yeah, well, we make a case, and people have just heard this, but we make a case on this podcast that a family wedding is not only a really important moment in your family's life, but it's an important moment to worship and go like, this is a very important picture scripturally, the wedding. So we want to make a big deal of it. Doesn't mean you have to spend a ton of money. But Dora's just told me, look, what you need to do is create a budget and go, this is what we're planning on spending. Now, how do we allocate that money so that the things that we think are important get done? Because you can't get all of your dreams to come true and on your invitations and on your rehearsal dinner. You just can't have the very best of everything, or you're going to get into Dora territory.
The numbers I'm talking about are for the wedding, not the engagement ring, not the rehearsal band.
So, okay, that's enough business. Now let's talk fun. Okay. How many weddings do you do a year?
Right now, about 2 to 4.
2 to 4 weddings a year.
Correct.
So these aren't $10,000 weddings if you do 2 to 4 a year.
No, they're not. I mean, there was a time when we did like 25 weddings a year.
You did 25 weddings. You know what you're talking about in this space, but why do you do SoFi now?
Weddings, our 80% of our business is corporate, probably a little bit higher than that. Weddings are the least profitable because people are price sensitive. Even if you have a ton of money to spend, people are price sensitive. It's personal. People it's a very personal thing. Like you said, it's a family celebration. So they want to spend a lot of time with you talking about their celebration. So the ROI for weddings is not really there unless we charge a ton of money. And even at our highest, it's just not there.
Okay, I know that you're like me. You want to hear a little bit of the juicy stuff. So would you tell us a crazy demand that's been put on you paint a picture for us of an amazing wedding that you've done.
I'll do a little thing. Our average wedding is about $250,000. It was a destination wedding in a remote location, so there wasn't like a Nordstrom or Target in it, or just like, anywhere we could just go grab a pair of shoes. We were at a ski town, small ski town, 2 hours from any kind of big store. So we had to find him a pair of shoes to wear, just going to every boutique possible store in town, just curating these shoes, take it to him, see what he wanted to wear.
I was doing some of that, driving around looking for shoes for this guy.
Yeah, the only weddings he shows up to are destination weddings in a really fun location.
Yeah, of course. If you want to hear a couple more tales of extravagant weddings and crazy brides, hang on to the very, very end of this episode and we'll share a little bit more. It'll be bonus, so I don't want to take our time with it.
Okay, so Dora kind of lays out what weddings are going to be costing in the future and what they cost now. And I thought it would be interesting just to get your thoughts on how people can be saving for weddings. I didn't mention this before, but this issue, I'm pleased to say, comes directly from our Volley crew. Now, if you donate to Abraham's Wallet, and when I say donate, I don't mean that you have to give us $10,000. But by the way, the giving tax exclusion is $17,000 right now. But
not related to what you're talking about.
Not related, because you get a tax benefit if you give to Abraham's Wallet.
Yes.
But when I say donate, I mean, for me, something so simple for somebody to say, hey, I'm in and I'm kind of a part of what you guys are doing, is that we have thrown out $5 a month. If you would throw a cup of coffee our way monthly, then there's kind of these doorways that open, which are just our way of formalizing that you're on the team. So one of those big things is that you get entrance into our volley community. So that is a kind of a Slack line that's video based. That's everybody in our community. We talk about episodes. Everybody talks about current events happening financially. And one of our volley people, Ross, was it Ross Heyman that did that?
I believe so.
Okay. He said, we just had a little baby girl and I'm thinking about her life, which is something that I approve of. And he says, I'm thinking about her wedding and what I should be doing to work toward it. Now, Dora has told us that the numbers might be a little imposing that we might be looking at in the future. And I don't know if anybody's jaw drops when she's throwing out these numbers of what weddings could cost you. But I'm interested in you giving us thoughts, Mark, about why make a hubbub about the celebration of weddings at all?
Yeah.
Why would we even throw this much money and attention at it?
Yeah, I think about weddings kind of like the way I think about inheritance. You've heard me talk a lot about inheritance.
Do it again.
Because I think that we don't really understand. We don't understand inheritance when it's a term that's used over and over in the Bible, and we put our modern understanding of that word, and we miss a lot of the things that the scriptures mean to communicate to us when they talk about inheritance. So I think we do the same things with weddings sometimes. We think, well, that's like kind of a wasteful party where there's
Like a
going to
party, right?
there's going to be somebody that gets too drunk, and there's going to be, some awkward family experiences, and it could range from, there was a quick service in the church, and then we moved it to the fellowship hall for a slice of cake and a glass of punch, all the way to we flew 500 of our closest friends to Italy and took laps at the Ferrari test track the day before. And, I don't know exactly what Dora has already said on this episode because we're recording this before I've been able to hear that. But you guys have done some wild, ornate weddings that just go over the top in every way. But I think we think about that stuff when we think about weddings. One of those extremes, somewhere in the middle, probably for most of us, it's somewhere in the middle. But I think that, the scripture says, Matthew 22, Jesus spoke to them in parables and said, the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who gave a wedding feast for his son. And he sent his servants to call those who had been invited to the wedding feast, but they refused to come. So the wedding feast and the wedding, the marriage of the bride and the lamb, this is like an ongoing picture that's used to tell us something about how we relate to the Lord. And I think the Lord means us to take it very seriously when we're going to present a picture to the world. I know for me, my wedding was probably, for a lot of people that attended, one of the only times they will hear the gospel just plainly laid out in a way that, like it or not, if you want the free food and the delicious cake and all that, then you're going to have to
root beer.
Right. Your dad's funeral was another place where the guy who was preaching used it as a chance. He said, there's going to be people here who may never have heard the gospel. They're going to hear it. So that's good. That's one thing. But really, I think beyond the getting a preacher to share a message, there's a significance to the wedding that it actually is a picture of Christ and the church that's before everyone. And that's true, believe it or not. That is true, even if two people who don't follow Christ are getting married. He designed us to illustrate this truth about reality, because most of us will get married, and that's a significant event. So I think that we should be thinking about weddings as worthy of making a big deal of. Now, we're going to talk about money now. I'm not saying everybody should go break the bank and say to heck with it. Just like we say, on a much smaller scale, Sukkot. We talk about Sukkot as this awesome, fun time to have a feast, but we never tell people, go put it all on your credit card and figure it out and how to pay for it. No, we're not saying that. But we are saying it's worth planning ahead for. And if you're tendency is to go, well, I would rather just put all that money in an index fund, and I'll give my kids $10,000 after they get married instead of spend it on stuff like photographers and DJs. I think this is actually a time where it's appropriate for a father to say, I'm going to put on a party here, and we're going to celebrate not only my family growing in this way, we're also just going to celebrate truths about ourselves and our relationship to the King.
That's so good. I think most people do the former that you describe, which is it's kind of an elaborate party it's mainly for my kids, and so I have to kind of mitigate how much money is appropriate there, as opposed to, now this is one of the most important worship services that a family can possibly throw. And so it's a celebration not only of the two people who are getting married, it's supposed to be a living prophecy of this coming wedding feast of the Lamb that we're looking forward to, that's talked about in the book of Revelation. That's the kind of the culmination of all things, when the church is finally joined permanently with the groom that redeemed us. And we're supposed to talk about that. We're supposed to rejoice in it. And it's supposed to be worth the hoopla. And again, I'll echo what you say, which means that doesn't mean that you have to be ostentatious. It doesn't mean you have to go find the nicest country club in town. But I think that effort should be put forward to make it a bit of a do. I really do. And I think that honors not only the children, and it underlines, hey, the establishing of a new covenant in our family is a very important and sacred thing, but it honors the Lord. And it says we rejoice in the fact that we know we have this day coming. So let's take somebody like Ross, who initially asked the question on Volley, and he's trying to be responsible with his money. He's got a new baby girl. And what is your advice to him as far as if he says, I want to put money aside now so that I'm not blindsided by the potentially extravagant cost of throwing a nice wedding for my daughter? What should I do?
Yeah, so this one, I wish that I could tell you, hey, I'm going to share the secret account that the government has created for you to grow tax-free money for weddings. Unfortunately, if you've been paying attention, you may have realized our government is not a big fan of biblical concepts behind the union of two people in marriage.
No.
So they're not subsidizing your wedding savings. And while you could create an account in your kid's name using a UTMA or UGMA, Uniform Transfer to Minors account, we've talked about those in the past. You can save a little bit of taxes by creating those for your kids. I don't recommend it because those accounts, depending on what state you live in, become full property of your children either when they turn 18 or 21 normally. And even those of us who were relatively buttoned up at 18, we might have taken that money and said, I know you saved this for my wedding, but I really need to move to New York City and spend 6 months trying to find myself, and I'm going to use it for that. And so it really may go to something you didn't hope it was going to.
Facts.
There's nothing like a 529, which is an education savings account, or anything like that would really help you when it comes to wedding savings. But we can learn something from education savings, because for most people, the timeline is pretty similar. With education, if you're saving for college, we tend to think in about 18-year chunks. With weddings, depending kind of what your timeline is, I am thinking I would like to have funds ready around that same amount of time. Now, we could have a whole nother discussion about at what age would you encourage a daughter to start thinking about getting married, but I'm not necessarily saying your daughter's going to get married when she turns 18. But it would be nice, in my opinion, to have the money then. For some people, maybe it's 21 or 22. It's probably not 35.
Right.
If that's your timeline, we need to have a different discussion.
Yeah.
So the question then just becomes, how much should I save and where should I save it? That's a long enough timeline. Like, even let's say you have a 10-year-old daughter right now, and you're thinking, I've got about 10 years to save. That's a long enough timeline to take some risk with your money. And remember, when we say risk with investing, we're not saying gambling. We're not saying we're going to go put it on black and
No.
hope that it works out. We're just saying we could invest in more volatile assets like the stock market that's going to go up and down quite a lot. So if we were saving for something next year, it'd be very risky because we could have a year like 2022 and be left with 30% less money than we had at the start. But over 10-year periods, the stock market actually not super risky. It's volatile, but not risky. We've had a long track record to show that 10-year timelines are enough time to iron out the ups and downs and get to kind of that return that we're looking for. So you could take some risk. You will want to dial that down as you near your goal. So this is where it's very similar to education savings. You might be invested in 100% stocks in year one, but by year 9 of your 10 years, you've switched that to being invested in only 30% stocks. That way, if the stock market took a big nosedive, you wouldn't get hosed in the way you would if you were 100% invested in stocks.
So I'm hearing you say that you could think of a coming wedding the kind of the way that you think of a retirement, which is that you have a target date that you want to be ready for, even if it doesn't get emptied out at that date. You want to be ready for that date, and that you early on, when it's far away, you could be taking more risks with that fund, and as you get closer to the date, you could make it more and more secure, so that you get less volatility, but maybe you were able to capture some of the volatility in the early years. So what kind of fund should that be in?
Yeah. So if you go back, and maybe we can put a link to this in the show notes, but we've done an episode on asset allocation where we talked about how to build a portfolio of investments based on your goals and how much complexity you're willing to get involved with. So it can be as simple as choosing 2 investments. You could go open an account at Vanguard or Fidelity or really wherever you want and choose the Vanguard Total Stock Market Fund and the Vanguard Total Bond Market Fund. And you might start out 90% stocks and 10%. And you could, if you, I wouldn't exactly do it this way if I was managing it, but you wouldn't go too far wrong if you had a 10-year timeline and you just said, every year I'm going to switch it by 10%, one to the other.
Right.
So something like that is totally fair. You could get more complex. When we manage money for people, we include actually a pretty big chunk of their money in some pretty straightforward things like that. And then we include a whole lot of other things to sort of fill gaps in the portfolio that we think actually contribute to better returns for investors. But so there's a broad spectrum of how complex you can get, but I don't want anybody to think, well, I don't know that much about investing, so I'm not going to get too fancy. I'll just put it in a savings account, because if you have a 10-year timeline, you're really losing out by going that route. We think you should be investing where you can get better returns than you'll get in just a savings account.
Yeah. I would just throw in for Ross that I think there is value in putting that money into its own account. Whether he had indicated that he wanted to put money there, I don't think annually. I think he said monthly, just to put a small amount of money there monthly. To me, the value of putting it in its own account, even if it's just, as you say, an investment account at any place where you can get an investment account, is that you won't think of that as this is part of my wealth. You won't think of that as a part of this is my retirement, that it lives separately and that thing can grow. And it's meant to be a gift. It's for your child and for their wedding. And you simply don't think of it when you think of what's my net worth. You don't think of that account, even though it is technically your money.
Yeah. So that's something that you could work with a financial advisor to figure out the right mix. It's probably not something you would call a financial advisor just to do this one thing. But if you're already thinking, hey, I could use somebody to help me straighten out my overall investments, that's a place you could talk to an advisor. That's what we do. We almost always talk weddings when we're creating long-term plans for people. But if you aren't there and you're just like, hey, I just want to start saving, there's a lot of robo advisors, which are software-driven investment platforms where you can say, I want to have this much in this long. What should I invest in? And they'll actually spit out some options for you. I think SoFi. Have you heard of SoFi?
Yep.
They actually have a really good one because they don't charge any fees for their platform now. They're trying to grow, so they probably will charge fees someday in the future. But today there's no fees, and they have a good platform that will allow you to do something like that. So if you're listening to this and just getting started and saying, I've got a few bucks a month and I'd like to invest it because I've got a long time before I'm going to be paying for a wedding, then I think that would be one good option. There's a lot of other good options. We don't have any relationship with those companies.
Yeah, the big thing at this stage of the game for somebody like Ross is that he has to listen to things like what Dora has to say. He can look out there in the market, put his ear to the ground, and he has to set a target amount. What is his goal amount that he wants to be there in 20 years? And once he's kind of established that, well, then he can work toward that, assuming, historical market returns and work his way to that number. That we can't help you with. You've got to figure that out for yourself, whether you're going to have a $10,000 or $150,000 wedding. We can't help you with that, but we can certainly give you some thoughts on how to put that money aside and how to build toward it. So that's the savings account thing.
Before we jump completely off the money side,
okay.
I just want to make a couple quick disclaimers and then illustrate something. Number one, if you get to wedding time and you haven't saved well, you have a lot of options. You can do a cheaper wedding. You can take out loans to pay for a wedding. You can partner with your kids and say, hey, I don't have as much as I hoped, but I can contribute this much, and I'm willing to maybe take a $5,000 loan and pay it off myself over the next while. So here's what I can do for you. And you know what happens if you get to retirement age and you haven't saved enough? Nobody's giving you loans. You're just going to live on whatever you got.
True.
So I always tell people this with college savings, and I tell them this with any big goal. Make sure that you've taken care of the thing that can't be financed in any other way before you try to worry about
that's a good thought.
Financing a wedding. So if you're listening to this and you're 25, it's awesome that you're thinking about saving for a wedding. It's more important probably that you're thinking about, have I made a plan for how I'm going to fund my weekly expenses when I'm no longer able to work? And have I funded that plan? Which doesn't mean don't save for a wedding until you're fully, financially independent and can retire. It just means if you have made a plan and you're on track with that plan, good. Now we can move on to the secondary things like college savings and wedding savings.
That's great.
So, very important. And just, I'm going to put you on the spot, Steve, but let's say that you wanted to save $20,000 for a wedding and you had 12 years. And you could get a market rate of return on your money. How much do you think you would need to save per month to have $20,000 in 12 years?
And are we assuming that I start with zero? I'm just going to start building that fund?
Yep.
$20,000 in 12 years. Okay. Monthly. The question is monthly.
Yep, monthly.
Let's say let's start the bidding at $100 a month.
You're pretty dang close. It's $90.
Okay.
So what if though you have 20 years? Then how much do you need to save per month to get to the same $20,000?
This is a fun game. I'm starting with zero, and I've got 20 years based on normal market returns to get to $20,000. Could I put $20 aside a month?
Not quite that low, but it's more than that. It's $40.
Okay, $40. I can do it.
Less than half by starting 8 years earlier on a 20-year timeline. So that's just, we beat the drum a lot, but compound interest is a real
It's a
thing,
real
folks.
thing.
And even if you're just saying $20,000 sounds like a lot of money, the same truth holds if you're trying to save 5 or 10. Certainly, if you're trying to save 100,000, starting early will behoove you.
And let me bring this right back home. If you have engaged in a little experiment called LoDoFeb, you know that you can basically find $40 in the cushions of your sofa monthly. And that if you have $0, Ross, and you just had a child and you want 20 grand to be sitting there in 20 years, $40 a month, put it aside. That's really meaningful. And I'll also tell you that when it comes to compounding, if you could start with $500 and then put your $20 on top of that, you've just saved yourself about 3 years.
Yeah, maybe it's the tax return, guys. Just forget that exists. Don't take the vacation.
That's
Stick it
exactly
in the
right.
wedding fund.
That would be so wise. Okay.
Hang on, Steven, just for the sake of, let's say that you still want to get to $20,000.
Yeah,
And you
okay.
got 20 years and you get a hefty tax return this year.
He's got to do it. He's got to tell us, folks. What are you saying a hefty tax return is?
I don't know. What do you think?
$2,000?
Yeah, that sounds about right to me. Then how much do you need to put into this account to get
Well, depending on who you are in America, you can either think, wow, $2,000. Let's tell the kids we're going to Disneyland in July. And let's see if we can blow that money apart so that it's like it was never there. And you decide, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to do a staycation and go to Indianapolis to the wonderful children's museum there. And instead, we're going to put that money towards little Susie's future wedding. And now we have 20 years that we started with $2,000. I'll throw it out there again. Could we do the $20 a month?
It's close. It's $24 a month.
Well, that's great.
If you wanted to fund the whole thing, you're at about $5,200 of initial down payment. So if you put down
amazing.
$5,200 today and it grows, and we didn't specifically say this, but I would use what's called a joint taxable account if you're married. That's just a taxable account that you and your wife both own together. If that was put in there and it earned a market rate of return, which I'm conservatively calling 7% over that period, then we would be in shape to end up with $20,000 20 years later.
Great. Okay, well, we are running low on time. So we're going to do some quick hits of kind of other ideas around weddings. So I mentioned this to our Volley people, but I have a neighbor 2 doors down who is a restaurant owner, and he is a wine guy. He travels to France and to Italy for wine. This is a man who is very serious about wine, and he has 3 daughters, and he has put scads of wine in his little basement wine room, little safe. He has got you wouldn't know it from the looking at his house from the front, but it's got a wine room in the basement. And he has spent many thousands of dollars because he's already purchased all the wine for his daughter's weddings. Within the year of them being born, he spends, I don't know, maybe I can get an interview with him to tack it on here. So he's very excited about the value that he's actually going to be bringing to their wedding, because the wine will be worth much, much more 20 years from now. And he's specially chosen this wine. I think that's a pretty neat gift as a restaurateur that's going to bless the daughters, I can only assume. And he'll be very proud of that gift. That's kind of a fun thing. Ross on the Volley thing mentioned balsamic vinegar. Now, I don't know the first thing about personally aging balsamic vinegar. I know that it'll either go rancid or it'll get delicious. And I know that those things have like a 25-year shelf life. But it was an idea that Ross threw out there. If you're into that and you can make that happen, there's an idea. It would certainly be cool if you bottled something the day your child was born and then pulled it out at their wedding. That would be pretty cool.
We watched a documentary on this family that does balsamic vinegar in Modena in Italy.
there you go.
And it was so interesting because the patriarch who started the family business, he said it's not 20 years. It's for their vinegar, which is now the best in the world. He said it's roughly 80 to 100 years of aging. So
Oh my stars.
he was barreling stuff that was going to be taken out when his grand or great grandchildren were
Good
ready to start
gravy.
selling it. And sure enough, the documentary was made when these great grandchildren were like, now we sell the best vinegar in the world. And it's because this guy planted a tree he would never see grow 100 years ago.
Interesting.
So kind of cool.
Okay, you got to now tell us the name of your documentary.
I will find it and it will be linked in the show notes because I
Okay.
don't remember off the top of my
Okay.
head.
I'll just kind of tell you personally what we're doing and what we have done is that when we were first married, if you're getting married, this is an idea. We started a journal for our children when we were first married. And one of our traditions when we go away for our anniversary in May is that we write in that journal every year. And what we're writing is we're trying to give some highlights, we're trying to add to the story of our family. Here's a big event that happened this year in our family, just to chronicle our family story and put a little marriage advice that we've learned in this past year from our marriage that we would want our children to incorporate into their future marriages. So our idea that we're kind of excited about is, presenting with all of the pomp and circumstance, presenting this journal to our children and their new spouses on their wedding day and go like, we hope that this gives you a leg up on your marriage. One other thought, if we're dreaming, this is also something that we've put in our trust is that we believe in Deuteronomy 26:5, which says that in the first year of marriage, the husband is not to go off to war, but he is to stay home and learn how to please his wife. So to us, what that verse means is that first year of marriage isn't a good time to make radical changes to your home, and it's not a good time to take on huge responsibilities if you're a newlywed. That really that first year is about being available to your spouse and establishing your family. So we want to do everything that we can to ensure that our future married children don't feel the pressure to go out and make a name for themselves, start a new business, whatever their first year of marriage. So our intention, our desire is that we'd be able to give them a sizable gift at their wedding, to give them a sizable gift that's earmarked for a down payment on a home that would get them into a home and give them cushion money so that if I don't know what they're going to be doing, but if they're interns at some big company so that they can learn a business, they don't feel like, well, I really can't give the time that I should have to developing my knowledge in this area. I have to go get a middle manager job somewhere. No, we want them to stay in that place where they're learning their industry. They don't feel the pressure to, I've got to go bring home the bucks. I think that can start in year 2, and that's fine. I don't want them starting new businesses their first year of marriage. That can start year 2. That's fine. But we have put money aside not only for the wedding, but to give them as a gift at the wedding so that they feel financially safe, comfortable during that first year of marriage. So just some thoughts.
No, that's great. Well, we're doing sort of the same thing you're doing. I think the only other thing I'll say from having gone through the process of planning for this type of thing with a bunch of families is that, I don't want to blend too many things in one episode, but a lot of people are asking questions about how fast, we heard Dora talk about how fast wedding expenses are rising.
Yes.
We know college expenses have gone completely bananas.
Yes.
All these expenses are going crazy, and people are going, well, I just don't even know what it's going to be like in 15 or 20 years when my kids are hitting that age. And a lot of the people that I work with every day are saying, let's create a bucket and just call it Life Starter. And for Amelia and I, we think about kind of these expenses of a gift to get kids started so that they could do some of the things that you mentioned. A wedding and even education might be there might be value in giving some optionality to the kids inside of that fund, so that we would say, hey, we are going to do a wedding. We're not going to say you're allowed to go to the courthouse and make nothing of this deal.
Yeah.
Lord willing. But if you want to spend $100,000 on a wedding, I'm not sure, depending on where we're at, we might not be able to do that and do what we'd like to do, but we're going to give you a gift that you have some flexibility on. How much do we want to use for wedding? How much would we like to use for example, a down payment on a home, or all sorts of other things that are good. I don't know if that's kind of conflicts with your view of how you guys are doing it, but it's something for us that we could see having one. I have 3 daughters. I could see one of them going, I just want to do it up. I want to go full blast on the wedding. And another one saying, we're going to have a little bit more of a simple wedding, but we would like to buy a rental home and sort of have that even be an asset that fuels that year of being able to not try to go out and immediately make as much money as possible to make life work.
That's great. Great.
The one thing we also didn't hit is boys.
Well, I did ask Dora about this, and she just said that it's still the expectation that the groom's family pays for the rehearsal dinner, and that the very best way to do that is to rent a room at a restaurant, a private room at a restaurant, because you're already paying for food. And a lot of times they will take care of something all the way down to centerpieces. I had told her, think of 40 people at a rehearsal dinner. So this is the whole wedding party. These are close relatives, grandparents. And she said, if you think of $100 a person, you're going to do just fine. And so it's something to think of if you have boys thinking of earmarking money for weddings. Doesn't have to be huge, but you are going to have to cough up some dough. And you say to give sons, did you say you should give them $10,000 for their engagement rings?
No, I said that there's no way if I had a son, I was going to help him at all with an engagement ring. That one was completely up to me, and I actually feel like it was a good thing, and even a part of the family story we tell, that I went out and sold a bunch of my stuff in college so that I could buy a nice wedding ring.
Gotcha. Okay, great. Well, good thoughts, and we'd love people's any reactions to this stuff, because we like to chew it up, especially with people on our Volley channel. Mark, you said that there was one other note that you wanted to give to somebody in our community. It's sobering, but kind of exciting to think that we could collectively come through for a family in need. Would you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I got some really sad news this morning, and we've asked you guys to give money to support what we're doing here on the podcast in the past, and you've been very generous. So one of the things that came to my mind when I got this news was that this actually might be something that our crew here could help with. There is a family, the Tegge family in Cincinnati, that they have been longtime listeners to the podcast and supporters of the podcast. A lot of their friends are friends with the people who are listening to this right now. So, and they were pregnant with their 6th child, and she had a pretty rough pregnancy, and there was just some unclear stuff going on medically, and went to the hospital recently, a few days ago, and they ended up going ahead and delivering baby Jairus, who was born at 31 weeks and is actually doing really well. But unfortunately, the mother in this family continued to get sick and passed away this morning. And leaves behind now 6 children. So she was not up in age. She was only 40 years old, but had they were parents to 6 kids, if you include the newest addition now. And the husband is obviously left to try to figure out what next. And I know that financial needs are not the primary thing I'm sure he's feeling right now. But I also know that this is a guy who had been on the Abrahamic path and starting a business in the last year and really kind of moving out in faith. And I can't imagine too many bigger hits than what he has experienced. So I would love it if we could support them. That's something, my family has already talked about. We will be supporting this family. And I know they have a great community there that's also sort of physically present with them constantly right now. But if there's anything we can do, I don't see a lot of stories that hit me quite like this one. So even aside from the personal connection and the fact that I know the Tegges pretty well, I would love it if you hear this and it feels like this is something you'd like to support, then we're going to put a link to the Give, Send, Go campaign in the show notes. And I would just love it if we and our crew was able to really pour some gasoline on that campaign. Certainly, whether you can give or not, whether you feel led to give or not, please pray for this family, because Stephen and I were talking before the episode. This is pretty serious when it comes to the things in life that feel like they would be hard to bear. This is pretty high up there.
Great. Well, we'll put a giving opportunity in the show notes, and remember them. I threatened a couple of weeks ago, didn't I say? Yeah, that we would be hyping cleaner soaps and sundries, and we are doing that, as you might have noticed. And so, in my goodbye this week, I'm throwing it to our little promo, which ends with a discount possibility for cleaner products. So here we go, and we'll see you next week. Hey, I want to throw a little spotlight on Cleaner Soaps and Sundries. They're a men's personal care brand run by a great guy, CT, who makes cleaner products and does a ton of good for vets along the way. I had tacos with this special ops dude turned entrepreneur in Texas and knew right away this brand is something our listeners are going to love to support. I think you're going to dig the soaps and deodorants and pomades and beard oils, all made from totally natural based ingredients. I use them and I love them. So find all their great stuff at KLENR.com. That's cleaner.com. And if you type in AW, you'll get an automatic 10% discount on whatever you find. So check them out.
Okay, back with Dora. Some more tales. Now, I'd like for you to just set up for people what one of your high-end amazing weddings look like. She had a client that wanted a wedding in Italy, and the idea was this family was going to rent out, drum roll, rent out a town. They were going to rent a village in Italy and move all of their guests, who were going to be flying mostly from Cincinnati, to this village in Italy.
I mean, I don't like it.
It is a village. It's a village that a guy bought and remade into a resort. It was its own little village. It is. It's true. You can look it up. As a part of this deal, they were going to have all fresh handmade pasta that's made on site for everybody. And then, of course, if you're going to travel all the way out to Italy, they wanted to do some day excursions for all of their guests, including one of the most exclusive golf courses in the world, where a guest, here, check this out, guests can only play at this golf course once in their lifetime. You can play there once, and then you're not allowed to play again unless you're a member. And by the way, you're not going to become a member of this place. Another excursion was we would helicopter the guests from this town to the Ferrari factory, and that you could see how you could see how Ferraris are made, and then do a test drive of a Ferrari on a track. We're talking about
Sounds very fab.
And then now here's the sad button on the end of this wedding. She planned this whole wedding out. COVID killed it. Didn't happen. What a bummer. Okay, tell us some tales.
I mean, I don't want to get too specific. I love my clients, but you see a lot, and the way that you are dealing with your children right now will directly impact.
They're sending you around like servants to do anything that.
Absolutely. Yeah, we are. We have a service called concierge. So,
get me lip balm. Give me my favorite drink. I want hot tea right now.
when you press into that threshold for these kind of weddings, that is the level of expectation, and we deliver on it, but you're going to pay for it.
Nice. Well, if you want the very highest wedding, Laura's done weddings on the West Coast. She's done them overseas in Canada, you name it. And, if you're in that market, look up vivabellaevents.com, and she'd love to work for you. Yeah. All right. Thanks, everybody.